So what we're looking at it is the way these setups are um, laid out and the process that we would be following to perform these setups, the ones that we had discussed on in the last class, the functional setups. Since you've already seen this, this is our springboard, and this is where we come to perform all the tasks. As I said, all the setups and anything related to the changes to these setups. Earlier, the one that we had used was sysadmin, but here we'd be using that setup and maintenance. So this is where we come to. And in case if there is a change that is needed in a particular page, um, for some extra fields and some of the stuff, a partial customization options are available, and we would be using these options here to perform those things. And anything on the diagnostics, if you have to run the diagnostics, then we use the diagnostics option here. The application information is usually looked in from here using this option. So much so the about the release that we're using, or the current version that we are using, to check that we use this option about this application. And let's go into setup and maintenance. All right. Now we are in project financial management. So like I said, we have two options, the execution management and the financial management. The way these are set up is the order in which we need to proceed is this order, the order that you see right here. It starts with initial user, then we have an profile that we'll be setting up. So all the options that we go when we try to use this, the initial user is the one that we normally get with the instance. When we opt for the instance and we pay up the upfront, this is what we get in. After you've received the initial users, then you try to set up the rest of the accounts, the accounts that are needed to start the configuration in the system. Probably you'd be creating multiple application admins, one consultants, one each for Fin. Then if you're implementing Fin projects and then purchasing, probably each of the module owner would be having one um, login created per their name, and we would be proceeding to the setup. So once we're done here, the next option that we would have to look out for is these are the required task and all tasks. Since you've already seen this, let me quickly show these things again. Just a quick refresher. So once you set the user, the jobs that you would have to run, the ESS jobs that you normally run to get the system, the user running, and the user to be able to access the system. These are the options that we would need to set up, the jobs that we will have to run, so that the user is he or she can access the system and start the setups. So once we set up the user, we create the implementation users. Then we run the jobs, the input user and role jobs. Then we also run the run user and role synchronization process after the necessary roles are assigned to the user. Post which we also need to give the access set, the managed data access set, and all that stuff. So that needs to be done. So this is, in short, you would also call this as an LDAP job. So this is the region where we set up the initial user. Then we have the enterprise profile. So when we're talking about enterprise profile, then this is the what you call the enterprise that we have. The um, our business, the basic building blocks for our business is what we try to set up here. So if you look at it, we try to set up the locations, geographies, um, the reference data access set for the user. Uh, this is after you've created the user account, but otherwise these are the ones that we normally do, the required setups. And if you look at it, we get an exhaustive list of all the setups that come under this. It's categorized. Um, so uh, the geographies that we need to set up, right? We might have Latin, Latin America, then North America, then regular ones, the African, then probably the Middle East, all those geographies that we set up. And then we also have the enterprise HCM information. This is there are certain tasks that are shared, or the in a way you call them as the lighter module. Um, so anything that is needed to make sure that the information is available for PPM, or that you'll have to set up in PPM as well. The one if you're not using the actual implementation of, you're not doing the actual HCM implementation, or maybe it's just finance projects, and that's the perimeter of or the scope of your implementation. In that case, there are certain aspects of HCM that you have to set up. So when the full-fledged implementation is not implemented, but the base needs to be set up, we call that as light implementation of that module. So we are trying to use those features, but in a the it's curtailed. You don't have the exhaustive list or the exhaustive setups that you will have to do to make sure that the remainder of the modules, when you're implementing them, they don't get hampered, or they start working. So these are the basic setups. So um, in the enterprise information that we normally have, the name it shows the name. The other classifications, um, the options here, then the workday information. This is the description section. Now, if you look at it, this is totally that is defined under the HCM. When you set up the enterprise, these are the options that you would normally get, and these are the options that you would set up in case you want to change something. You want to then you go in for the update. Usually this is not necessary because this is set up by the initial user, the one who's setting up organizations and all that stuff. But this is just good to know options, in case if there is any change that is needed. And then we have the legal structure. Um, Tell me one thing, if you've already had the finance module, the training of the finance as well.
No, but we are familiar with up to financial reporting.
So this, since you're aware, I will try to skip through these. Um, this is again totally, I mean, it's not related to PPM, but we use these things. So let's go to org structure in that case, since you're also checking on these, right? So we'll move to the org structure. So in org structure, this is where we would start looking at it, or it is also relevant to the PPM. So remember on day one we said we had business units and we had project units, the ones that are coming into picture. So the business unit is as a part of the organization structure. This is um, not totally into PPM, but this is across the organization or across the implementation that we are doing. So we try to look at the business units from that perspective. It is more of a delineation of the business that we are performing. It's more of that option. So the business unit comes under the org structure. The project unit, that information we try to set up from the work structure and the project organization structure. So these are the ones that we normally use to set them up, set up the project organization. So these are the two main points that we would be doing from here. Now, if you look at it, we use this manage business units. The business units are created and shared across the application. So when I say application, even the payables uses this, receivables. The modules use this. So you can have this like these two things. Uh, we see vision retail business. Then we also have. If you look at this, will not, since this is common, will not try to go spend more time. But this is where we get the information. The defaults that we assign, the location. These are the options that we set up. It's just the basic information. This is when you create the business unit, this is what we give. Then this is one option where we are assigning the business unit. So let me show you this, how this works. I'm sure this would be a repetition because this would also be dealt in the other class. So here it is. We are trying to contain the scope that we have or that we are going to be using to this. Now, if you've noticed, the scope is where it is going to change. So what did we do now? Or what is it that we're going to do? I mean, this part, we are saying what functions can this business unit perform is what we're going to give here. So we said when this was created, they said this would be the sales organization. Business units are organization to to say it in an easier term. So what business functions can this operating or this organization perform? It will be used for billing and revenue. If in case we are using that for payables, purchasing, then we'll have to set up these options. We're going to use this for project accounting. So this is what we would be using here. And if you're going to use this for billing and revenue management, then this is another option that we'd be using.
Have any uh, dependency that to get this offering we should have this thing I mean any prerequisite or any other offering is dependent on project accounting offering?
Yeah, we still need to, okay, whatever you account here, right, in projects, the bare minimum is you will still have to send it across to GL, right? So which means you need the accounting information. So when we're talking about the accounting information or the accounting string, if you want to have an accounting string, then you will have to have the basic the GL, the ledgers and all that value sets defined, right? So when you are defining the ledgers, then it's just not ledgers, right? You'll have to define the calendars. Um, since these are interdependent, or at least unless you have defined them, you'll not be able to use it, right? So that would become, in a way, it is a dependency. If you want to call it that way, it becomes a dependency. Your financial information has to flow through. That's the objective of using the project financial management. If you're using project execution management and you're not trying to send in data across, the transaction information or the financial information, then you're just trying to track the progress of the projects. But if you are using project financial management, then you will have to set up the information. Now, assuming that it's just between projects in GL and you're not using the AP or the AR, if you're not bringing that any information from those modules, maybe you want to enter everything into projects directly, then maybe you'll not have to have the other modules set up. But the basic information is you have to have a business unit, you have to have the ledgers, the calendar defined, because we have to have a project period.
Okay, got it.
So that's the precursor, if you want to call it that way. Those will be the precursors to define. And I will show you there's one more thing which we call that as the org hierarchy. So this is something which we share with HCM. You could create it from here, or you could have that created in HCM. But if you're not implementing HCM, then you will have to create from here. Okay, so once we set this up, now remember that this is till the point, maybe this is what was, what this might be discussed in the other modules as well. But when we say business unit and we don't really assign a ledger and legal entity to it, if we don't do that, then it is not tied up. It is not tied up to a particular. The reason you'd find this, people might not stress upon this, is when we are going to have the intercompany, right? Now, if you're using a ledger and this, you can have multiple legal entities, but this is what the one that you're going to select is default. All the legal entities that fall under this ledger would be available. Now, anything apart from this would become an intercompany. Or even in this, you might want to call it intercompany, depending on how your business is configured. So that might be of relevance to us when we're doing from projects perspective, where if you want to use the intercompany or just the business unit options or the project unit options, it depends. So, but this is what we would pick up. Let me pick an option here. Okay, so let me take this one. Here's primary ledger. So if you see this, under US primary ledger, we have three companies or three legal entities defined. And there's one more which says University US primary ledger. So let me take US primary ledger. And by default, it is bringing up this legal entity. I can click on save and cancel. Save and close, or save and then you can use this option. Earlier in release 9, 10, and 11, we had these options. When you click on this, on the drop down, you were able to proceed from this page to the next one, and then that would allow you to that with the continue option. So that is the reason why you still see these things here. There are at some places where you can still proceed to the next screen using these options, but they've tried dissociating it. So once this is done, now what you're trying to do is with this option, You've set up the business unit. Now you want to give access to the user for that business unit. And the scope, as you see here, it is contained only to this one. All right. So if you want to, I'm sure you have already seen this. When you come here, this is where you're setting up the context. You can have a context as all. You could set up business unit. You can pick up project classification, a ledger, the inventory organization, cost organization. You could pick up any of these. Since we're coming in from the area where we were trying to do the business or the setups related to the business unit, the context is set by default. Context is, uh, security as such. We remember we said this is role-based security. So it's more like who does what job. In short, that's how they call it as. Uh, if you remember from your other trainings, it is who, or who in the sense which user has what access. That's a small sentence or phrase we use to remember. So basis that we try to see. So now here the context becomes more important, more relevant. So what is the context in which we are talking, or what is the parameter that we have set up and we are talking? So business unit is the one, and you could use. Now I'm trying to use Casey. So if I use this option, then we're going to look at all the rules for this user related to this context. The ones that still are not set up or they have not been given access. You see this thing? These are the rules against which the business user does not have a value set up. So if I want to set up a value, or if I want to set the option here, I would use this. Let me pick up the username here just to avoid type. And here, once we set up the project rules and you start typing in here, this is what you would get. You would get a drop down which points at projects. But now let's take procurement manager in this case. All right, so see that procurement preparer, procurement manager, and we set up the business unit, and we pick up the option from here. The business for this business unit, or for this which business unit are we using? US1, US2. You'll have to set them up explicitly. Use this option to duplicate this instead of typing it again. We'll just have to change to US2. See that? And we click on save and close. Now when you do that, this would, once you've done it, when you click this, the procurement would not show up in here as it was showing earlier, which means if you want to look at it, you will have to go to this option now. Put this here, and let's say procurement. Now that you can give this, or you can avoid this, and then you could also do a regular search. Pick up the rule from here. Now you see this. The procurement manager is here with US1. If you go further down, you should be able to see for US2 as well. Since this step would be, once you perform this step, in terms of project, it's the same one, or the similar set. You'll have to do the similar setup here when you're doing it for project. And okay, now let's. As I said, these are the required setups. If you do these required setups, these are good enough for us to start using for proceeding further. The only additional one that we see here will be the business unit set assignment. Apart from this, it's all regular. You've already done the prerequisite setup. Now let's look at the workforce structure. So why do we use this workforce structure is the main reason to say this. In case you've set up the departments, or if you've using the divisions, if you've set them up and you want to use them in your project structure, that is when you would use this option. The divisions or the departments that you want to use, and the department tree, the jobs that we have, and the organization tree. So remember we said there are options that we or the setup options that we share with HCM, right? So certain things that they have already defined in HCM, you could share it from here. Now look at this. This is a project organization hierarchy. I mean, they've tried explicitly naming it as project organization hierarchy here. They've given the code. So this is what you would be using in the HCM implementation or the HCM team. They would have set this up for us. If they've not set it up, then we try to create one. We use create the option create tree, and we try to set this up. So this is for having this tree structure to say how the business units and how the departments or how the divisions or the project organizations, how do they roll up. That is what we look at, or that is what we have here. So those departments or the business units, the roll up, the hierarchy that we set up, those we call them as the nodes. So since this is already created and in place, then when we try to query this, or when we try to open this, then it goes into, now if you look at it, it is in active status, right? So it will go back into the draft status, and we'll have to set this back into active status. So this is the first page where we give the basic information. And if you look at it, the status is changed into draft. The nodes will be the particular levels. Now imagine this as a tree with nodes, right? So at each node, there could be a branching out, and those become, all these become your those nodes become the project organizations. So now if I look at it, so this American division, Europe division, and you could have a further drill down in case you want to have. This is the business unit, and in case you have the department further in underneath it, then these become the you can break it down, the business unit, and you can have the departments underneath it. So these become your departments that you have defined.